Taking pictures of the fire?
Well, we have about at the same amount of miles for the same number of years, yeah. There you go.
This thing's kind of crickety.
It'll be glad I ain't
It's just barely on over there on the other side. Is it? If it was pushed in more.
No, I pulled it on more.
I didn't worry more about it.
breaking in the middle. Hi. Hey. Yo.
He's not got. He doesn't even have aims at me. He needs a support right here.
No, it's fine.
I got a map. You saved my place for me.
Break with the front.
At this time, I'd like to introduce someone who requires no introduction to this family. Ross and Maurine Allen, who are with us this evening. We want to thank them for coming this great distance from China. They spent the last year in China and they came home just early enough to make it to the reunion. I'm sure they wanted to stay much longer. I understand they turned off the heat in March.
March 29th.
March 29th they turned off the heat. And they turned it on December 1st?
No, November 15th.
And before that and after that they had no heat in their apartment.
Wow.
Well, in any case, we'd like to hear more about their experiences. And if they would, who is going to start?
I was going to start, but I've been preempted.
Okay. Maurine?
Because I wanted the last word.
Okay. Well, I'm not a bit worried about his talking to this group tonight because I'm confident that as soon as you get bored, you're all going to start throwing tomatoes and hissing and everything so that he won't go on too long. But, and the children will especially inform us when it's time to quit. But so all I'm going to do, you probably think that this album is full of pictures of our family so that we can pass it around and brag about our family. This is our Chinese family, and our students in China became our family. So I'll just pass this around and let you wonder what the pictures are. Here we have pictures of the building where our apartment was located, right on the campus of the university where we taught.
Okay, show it here too.
We were in a city named Dalian in northeastern China, what used to be called Manchuria. And we taught university-age students English. Our students were going to become teachers of English in middle school. And Ross taught the senior students. They graduated in June and would be receiving their teaching assignments just a couple of weeks after we left China.
Let's put all this wood in.
What?
Oh, that's keep talking to Lindsay.
Oh.
You have to ignore that down there, sorry.
She said, what's she talking about?
Okay. And then I have a picture of the building where we taught, the foreign language department. Picture of Dalian is a seaport, a large seaport in China, and has some beautiful beaches. I have a couple of shots of the beaches. I also have some pictures of us with some officials of the university. You'll see us there. And this is a good picture. I want you to notice this one at the bottom of the second page. This is our grandson Trevor in the middle of the picture with me and with one of my students. Trevor was on a mission in Nagoya, Japan. He finished his mission in December of last year, and then we arranged for him to come over to Dalian to visit us for our Christmas present. Oh, how we needed to have him with us. He was there just a couple of weeks. We had him speak to all of our classes. And he did a little bit of missionary work in China. Don't tell anybody.
What did they ask him?
They asked him everything about religion. They didn't know anything about the Christian religion, or that is, very few of them knew anything. We had one Christian student out of almost 400 students that we taught. Just one Christian girl. Anyway, so Trevor was loved by our students. Some pictures of typical China. Pictures of the inside of our apartment here, and pictures of different festivals that we attended, and of some beautiful little Chinese babies. And then a lot of pictures of us with our students. So you can just
Julie says she can't see him
You'll
there.
get to see
So
yeah,
let her
we'll
see 'em.
pass these around.
pass them around.
Then if you have any questions on them afterward, we'll be glad to answer them. Okay. So where shall I start at?
Right here.
Okay, Ross?
Okay, Ken is pretty smart. He sent me a notice of the reunion and said we were supposed to talk. And so we had to get out of our school year early so we could get here. He's also pretty smart in controlling the crowd because he announced and reminded everybody that we were going to speak just before dinner. So I noticed the crowd is much smaller than it was when we were eating. There is an awful lot to say, and I won't say it that much because I've been wondering a lot about what would be interesting and worthwhile for you to hear. Let me say one thing, and that is that some of you know we have lived in a few other countries of the world, but this experience was unique. When you live in another country, you learn a lot about the culture that you don't learn when you read books. That's only half of the truth about China. This was an experience that changed our lives. We are different people now than we were before. And that's hard to explain to anyone else, so I won't try. It's too difficult. But the main thing that made this different from experiences in other countries is living under the communist system. And it's impossible to realize how oppressive that is to people living in it. And the communist government in China had an anniversary, October 1st of last year, the 40th year of the communist government in China. And we thought that was they had big celebrations like we did when we had the birthday of the Statue of Liberty. Well, they had lots of fireworks because they invented them. Lots of pageantry, dances, and special programs. And we likened, or at least I did, the experience of 40 years of communism like Moses and the children of Israel wandering for 40 years in the wilderness. I thought that since there are a lot of kids here, first I ought to tell some things to the kids. How many of you saw some banana slugs? Okay, banana slugs. Banana slugs made me very hungry today when I saw them because one of the favorite foods in China where I live, they have different foods in different parts of the country, but one of the favorite foods looks very much like those banana slugs. Only it wasn't yellow. Other than that, it looked just the same. Only it grows in the ocean, and it's called the sea cucumber. Because when you chew them, they crunch like cucumbers. So whenever we had a special banquet, we got to eat things that looked just like banana slugs. We ate some other very interesting things that you might like. For breakfast, we didn't have Captain Crunch or whatever you eat. We had rice gruel. And all that is rice that's cooked with more water than the other rice. So it's kind of like porridge. You don't have anything else with it. You don't have sugar. You don't have milk. You just eat rice. That's your breakfast. Very delicious. One of the special features, this is another thing about food for the young people. The old people don't have to listen to this. There was a special feature on television one day about a man who lived in the countryside, they say there. He was in the countryside, and he was 93 years old and still running his farm. And so they were interviewing him and asking him how he attributed his long, healthy life of 93 years and still strong enough to do his farming. And he explained to them that several years ago, he noticed that ants were very strong. They could carry heavy loads. And so he decided that to make himself very strong, he should eat ants. Oh, dear. And so they showed him with his ants and how he prepared them. He gave them several recipes, how he ground them up and ate them. So he had things like ant burgers.
Did you put chocolate on it?
No chocolate, no ketchup, a little soy sauce. A little soy sauce is about all, and some salt. No rice, but he had them. Sometimes he had them over rice.
So he couldn't tell.
He thought it was pepper.
No, he had them. He had them at supper time. But he claims that after he started eating ants, he grew 5 new teeth. Okay.
You really did that. You really claimed that.
That's what he said. Okay.
Really, let's get you some ants.
For the glory of the Communist Party.
Let me tell you, young people, another thing that is very popular food in China. Because in China, they don't waste any kind of food. When they eat a duck, for instance, they eat everything. When they eat a chicken, they eat everything. One of the favorite foods, and you could go to a restaurant and order a whole plate of these, is chicken feet.
I have eaten.
Not the drumstick, but what goes below the drumstick with the claws and everything. So you see a whole plate of chicken feet. They're very delicious. But some parts are hard to chew, though.
Are they crispy? When you bite them, do they go?
No, but when you bite the head, they do. They squawk a little bit. After you eat the head and the comb and the beak and everything. This is still for the young people. The worst part about living in China is a very interesting habit they have. We think it's a very dirty habit, but they don't think so. This is their habit. You might be walking down the sidewalk. You might be sitting in the classroom. You might be anywhere, on the bus, on the train, and this is the sound you hear. And when you hear that, you look around so that you don't get in the way. And so, since there are 1.2 billion people in China, when you walk down the sidewalk, you usually are looking down so that you don't slip. Okay, now I want one more word for the teenagers now, and that is, I'm sure that many of you teenagers think that your parents are unreasonable with you. They give you too many restrictions. They don't give you enough freedom. Let me tell you how your life would be in China. How many of you like to get up really early?
Oh, me.
1, 2, okay.
Early. I need it.
In China, just before 6 o'clock, the loudspeakers come on, playing loud music, so that everybody wakes up. Because at 5 minutes past 6, you have to be dressed and out on the field to do calisthenics. You have no choice.
Everybody. The teenagers or everyone?
Everybody.
They give you 5 minutes?
They give you 5 minutes. If you want to get up earlier so that you make it, you can. And in our university, they did that too. The university students had to be out there. And they often checked in the dormitories to see if anybody was missing the exercise.
What was the penalty?
The penalty was punishment, they call it. The first time they just enter it into your records. Everything is entered into your records. The second time, you'll be in big trouble. So, everybody does it, whether they want to or not. But that's only the first part of the day. Every step of your life, you are told what to do, when to do it. You're told what school you'll go to, what classes you teach, will take, what desk you will sit at, who you will sit next to, what you will do when you graduate, where you will work, where you will live. Everything is controlled. Okay, well, that's just a word or two for the kids. I thought I listed 497 things to tell you. I won't tell you all of them. There, one very prominent thing about China in the present government is what they call backdoor. This is what we call in this country under the table. Backdoor negotiations are the way China's government is run. If you know the right people, you can get anything. One example is in the anniversary of the 40th year of the Chinese government, they produced some commemorative stamps. They were beautiful stamps, a set of 5 stamps. And this was, a picture of them was in the newspaper, and so I went to the post office several times to ask if they had these stamps. The answer was always no, they didn't have any. I mentioned it to a friend, a Chinese girl. Next time she came to our apartment, she handed me a set of these stamps. And I said, where did you get them? The post office keeps telling me they don't have them. And she said, my sister works at the post office. And I said, oh, well, that's great. How much do I owe you? She says, nothing. My sister works at the post office. Another person was asking me about calling long distance to America, and I said, well, I found out it's very expensive to call America. And he says, well, that's no problem because I have a friend who works at the telephone company. If I go after hours, I can call for nothing. You can do anything backdoor if you know the right people. It's a very, very bad thing because it forces everyone to be dishonest in all of their dealings. Another important thing that's happening in China right now is a sort of industrial revolution. It's different from the industrial revolution we had in this country in the 30s. The difference is that there's modern technology throughout the world and they want all of it all at once. And so it's causing some very interesting problems. I'll give you one example. We were flying out of Dalian to a city in the south in January, because in January they have their biggest holiday, which is Spring Festival break, which is Chinese New Year's actually. In the middle of January is when it starts. It was a very cold morning. We were waiting at the airport. We were flying in a brand new plane called an MD-82. That's McDonnell Douglas 82. This was built in China in a joint venture with U.S. McDonnell Douglas Company and China. So here's this brand new plane out there. All of the latest technology on this plane. It was a very cold morning, so the plane was frosted over. So they had to de-ice the plane before we could board and leave. They had a nice big hydraulic elevator to get up to the top of the tail section. We were watching through the window. These men went up on top of this elevator and dipped into an old bucket, an old broom made of reeds that they use in China, and that's what they brushed off the plane with. All of the latest technology and the most ancient implement they have there that they still use, a broom made of reeds. Another interesting thing is their money system. The money system is very strange to us because there are really 3 kinds of money you can use there. There is one money that only Chinese people are supposed to use, but that's what I got paid in, so I had to use that too. There's another kind of money that only foreigners in China are supposed to use. And then the U.S. dollars are usable in some places. When I would walk along the sidewalks in the city of Dalian, many people would come up to me and say, change money? Because this is the way the black market worked there. If I had U.S. dollars, I could change them at a much better rate than it was supposed to be in the official rate in the bank. But the yuan, which is the Chinese money, was devaluated while we were there. And a very interesting thing in the newspaper, they printed the new value of the dollar and the yuan, and they also said, and the black market rate is now such and such. So there was an official black market rate printed in the newspaper. And everywhere we went, I could change money if I happened to have American money that I wanted to change. Or if I had the foreign exchange money, I could change that at a better rate for Chinese money. A little bit about, I talked about food, let me talk a little bit about health. Some of my students would be missing from class, and I'd ask the class, where's so-and-so? And they say, well, usually they didn't say anything. You had to prod a little bit. They don't like to answer questions. They'd say, he offered blood. I say, what do you mean he offered blood? And that's when we say you give blood, to, you know, like to the Red Cross, they say you offer blood. When they offered blood, they missed 2 weeks of school because they're supposed to rest for 2 weeks after they offer blood. So it's a very good way to get out of school for 2 weeks. If you, well, it may not be a good way because the needles are not always too clean, but that's one way they did. In our, another interesting thing is the plumbing and wiring system. We had, they build cement buildings, and then they add whatever plumbing and wiring inside after they've got the cement building there. And we had wires running all over the ceiling and so on. We didn't know what all of them were, but we knew some of them were listening devices to hear what we said in our apartment. Others we had no idea what they were, but the plumbing was the most interesting because we were on the 3rd floor of a 4-story building, and when somebody was in the apartment above us, the plumbing, even though it was a cement ceiling, they had made holes in it for the plumbing and then patched it with more porous kind of cement. And so often when somebody was in that apartment, and they weren't there all the time, they were kind of coming in and out. When we went in to use our brand new Western style toilet, which we had, which is a rarity in China. You don't use that kind of toilet in China, and it's probably a good thing. But anyway, we could tell because the toilet seat was all wet, and there was water oozing through in several places. So when you'd use the toilet that day, you'd have to have an umbrella and hold it over you, unless you wanted to take another shower. And you didn't take showers often because we had hot water between 7 and 8:15 p.m. when they turned it on. That's the only time. By the way, the water, for you young people again, you're lucky if you go over here and get a drink of water out of the tap. You don't drink water out of the tap there. You don't brush your teeth out of the tap water. You don't wash your food with tap water. You have to boil it all first. We decided after a few months that we were going to try to do as much of our own cooking as we could. Before that, we had eaten all our meals in the dining hall. I found out they encouraged us to cook our own meals because we found out that it cost almost our whole paycheck to pay for the meals in the dining hall. And so we wanted to save money. And I was worried about the cook because of the foreign teachers. The Japanese experts fixed all their own meals. The Russian experts fixed all of their own meals. There were not very many people eating in the dining hall. And I said to our translator, well, what will happen to the cooks if we don't eat our meals there? I thought they might lose their job, and I didn't want to be responsible for them losing their job. And he said, perhaps they'll just fix their own meals. They don't worry about how much work you have on your assignment or how many people are assigned to do a job. If you don't have much to do, that's fine. And so if they didn't prepare our meals, they just fix their own. No problem.
And they still got their money.
They still got the same money, no matter what.
They probably got the food you would have eaten too.
Maybe so. That's one reason we quit. We thought they were getting our food anyway. So we hunted all over the city for cooking oil. Now, we wanted to do some of our own cooking. And we asked at every store, we couldn't find cooking oil. And then we found out you get cooking oil through your, quote, unit. Everyone is assigned to a unit. And some staple foods you get through your unit. You have to pay for them, and we had to pay more than they did, but we had to get them through our unit. And I found out they had cooking oil. So I said to our interpreter, how come you didn't tell me you had cooking oil? I thought, and he said, oh, you want cooking oil? And he had been with us to the store when we were asking for it. And I said, yes, we would like cooking oil. And he said, okay, would you like soybean oil or peanut oil? And I said, oh, that's a good choice. I think we'll try peanut oil. And he says, we don't have any peanut oil. So we got soybean oil. One of the things that concerned us most about China is the interaction between people. There is so much pressure on everyone that everyone is right at the boiling point. Any little frustration sets them off and they get very angry. And you see people arguing and fighting on the street and so on over very insignificant little things. But one of the interesting things is the way you're treated by clerks in the stores. Remember, their communist system, they don't care whether they sell you anything or not. In fact, if they wait on you, that's just extra work for them. They get paid the same if they just stand there and ignore you. So when they wait on you, they sometimes are very nasty to you. Now, once we had two of our students with us downtown, and they'd been helping us out on some things, so we thought we'd be nice to them and treat them to as near as we could find to an American meal. There was a restaurant called the Kentucky Restaurant. This was a restaurant that was supposed to be copying Kentucky Fried Chicken. It wasn't really the same, but it was similar, as similar as they could get with what they knew about it. And so we had our 2 Chinese students and our 3 Americans were there, and we ordered some meals for the 5 of us. And this one who is a very mild-mannered, lovable type person, one of our favorite students. He's the one with his arm around Trevor in those pictures, by the way. His English name was Sony. We had a lot of interesting English names. They chose their English name. In that same class with Sony, we had Eastman, we had Superman, Moto Man, Lion. Very interesting names. Anyway, this other American bit into her piece of chicken, and it was really raw and bloody inside. And she gave this to Sony, and she said, would you take this to the cook and tell them to cook it a little bit longer? So he very kindly goes up there, and in just a very few seconds he came back with it. And she said, oh, have they done it already? And he says, no, the cook says it's done enough.
Oh, God.
And that's the way you're treated as a customer. There's a very important event happening in China in September. This is the first time the country of China is taking care of hosting the Asian Games. The Asian Games is sort of like a mini Olympics for all of the Asian countries. It's a big deal. Thousands of athletes are coming and so on. And so they are doing everything they can to make a big positive impression and do good PR for China on this. And one thing they're doing is, like the Olympics, they're training homing pigeons to release during the opening ceremony and have them fly around and then return. They're having a big problem with this, though, because they just get these homing pigeons almost trained and they disappear because people outside around the city are shooting them and eating them. Because, you know, there's no such thing as private property. Everybody owns everything in China. So they feel they have a right to these. I think I'll add just a little bit. Well, let me give you one more example of how you're treated, by how Chinese people are treated by other Chinese people. There's the Air China. That's the name of their government airline. This other American asked one of the teachers if they would call Air China and find out when the planes arrived in Dalian from Beijing. He called Air China and asked, what times do the planes arrive from Beijing? He was asking at the information desk. And the person who answered said, I don't know, why are you asking me? And hung up. And that's the way you're treated. I remember once Maurine mentioned that we were trying to arrange for Trevor to come to China on his way home. And we were having trouble getting him a visa, Chinese visa. And so we had to make this emergency call to Tokyo. And so, knowing how the operators treat you if you speak not very good Chinese, or even worse if you speak English, I asked our translator to help us. He called the Beijing operator who makes the overseas calls. We got the number in Tokyo. I was trying to hear him, but the phones are terrible there, and the static was so bad, it was such a terrible connection I couldn't hear him. So I said to him, can you hear me? And I listened. I thought he said yes, and I said, I'm going to hang up. Don't worry. I'm going to call back and see if I can get a better connection. So I hung up, and I said to my interpreter, would you have the operator try that number again? There was so much static I couldn't hear. So he calls the operator again and explains to her that we couldn't hear. And she said to him, well, if they couldn't hear, why did they talk for so long? And this is the common way you're treated by each other in China. It's a really bad scene. So people have no individual rights, even after they die, because the current system is they do not want people to be buried. That's an ancient superstition that you bury people because there's not enough room. They don't want to waste good land for burial, and so they want everybody to be cremated. And now there's a movement that's supposed to make people happy about cremating their dead, because there are certain places where they have public parks, and you can be assigned one tree to bury the ashes of your departed relative there, so that they will fertilize the tree. And then they will contribute to society instead of using up the land and detract from society. Our situation, we arrived after the big turmoil in June, which is called by various names in the official language. They call it the unrest or the counter-revolutionary activities to play down the tragedy of the whole thing. And so we got there 2 months after that, and they have clamped down so hard on young people since that, especially university students. Our university students and faculty, well, the faculty at the start of this year were required to list every single student who was there the year before and rank them from 1 to 6 according to how much involvement they had in the demonstration. That becomes a part of their permanent record. It's a very handy thing. If the teacher didn't like a student, they can say they were very active in the demonstration, and that marks them forever. One thing they added for teachers and students, every Wednesday and Saturday afternoon, they go to school 6 days a week, every Wednesday and Saturday afternoon were devoted to philosophy classes. Philosophy classes is Marxism, Leninism, and Mao Zedong's thought. That's what they're called. The idea is that the students, if they really understood the socialistic program, would never have demonstrated. Therefore, we must not have been teaching them enough. So they have these special lessons every Wednesday and Saturday, and in the lessons, they're given strict examinations on them. In fact, the sophomores this year, for the first time, had a new examination that lasted, this was at the end of the school year, 2 hours a day for 5 days, all on communist philosophy. And it was called a philosophy class. That was, so our year there started out very miserably. We really hated it. We thought, what are we doing here? This is just, I mean, we hate everything we do. We hate the directions. We hate the restrictions. We're not getting through to our students. Why do we stay? The end of the year, however, we had completely changed our point of view. And it ended up being very difficult to leave our students. We had developed a real close relationship with many students. We loved our students. And leaving them was sort of like deserting them because we knew the situation that we were leaving. They are really great people with so much potential. And this potential, they're not being allowed to use. They have to do everything they're told. They're not allowed to use the creativity and the intelligence they have. And so many of them, the one thing that's constantly on their mind is, what can I do to get out of the country? That's the question we were asked over and over again. How can I get to America? And the answer is, it's almost impossible right now for them to do. And so we think that the situation now, even though they have clamped down very tightly, it's a very explosive situation. And we don't think it'll be too long before it blows up. It may have another tragic occurrence, but it can't possibly go on the way it is. So, that's a quick summary. If you have any questions, ask either of us.
I have one.
Yes.
About the water, does everybody there have to boil the water before they use it, or do they get tolerant of their own germs and you just have a different?
They do not drink water, except in tea primarily, and that's boiled.
What about for washing food and brushing teeth and all that sort of stuff?
Weren't as careful as we. And that's another reason we were a little leery of dining hall food. We saw how it was prepared. Not too careful, but we had no problems. And we found a medicine that would take care of everything. And I was going to bring a bottle of it tonight, but I forgot to bring it with us. I mean, I was going to bring it to the reunion, forgot. But it's called Asus Glue. And we read an advertisement for this when we first got there, and we spent the whole year hunting for it. Just before we left, we found it. So we bought a bottle of Asus Glue. What it is a special medicine that you take internally, made from the hide of certain high-grade donkey hides. And it is a glue, but it cures everything you've got. So we had no worries.
You're all right.
Did you really use it?
We are going to use it many times. We're going to show many people. And it's got a very nice bottle too. It looks like an ancient Chinese urn. We didn't get sick enough to use it yet. Yeah.
Decide who's going to be your wife or husband.
Okay. That's a good question. Marriage and courtship is kind of an interesting thing in China. Now, our students were university students. Sometimes university boys and university girls become interested in each other. Sometimes they fell in love and wanted to marry each other. There was no way they could do that because our students were from all over the province and a few scattered ones from other nearby provinces. But they would not have permission to marry because when they graduated, one would be assigned to work in this city, the other one would be assigned to work in this city. Chances are they would never see each other again. One faculty member of ours was married just before we left. He introduced us to his wife. Marriage means that he had been postponing his marriage for several years because he had not been assigned an apartment. And he had no place to live, so he couldn't get married. So the main thing that controls who you marry is the unit that you belong to. You're like an indentured servant to that unit. There are not marriages arranged by parents as much as in the past. It's more by the unit that you work for. If you have been there long enough and progressed far enough and they have an opening in an apartment, then you can get married.
Where do you live until then?
You live with your parents or somebody like that. And many people marry anyway and live with one or the other parent. Remember that families, traditionally Chinese families were very close-knit, very important family unit. This is not going to be the same in the future. In the last 40 years, that's changed dramatically. Many things have. One thing is that you're only allowed to have one child. Right now, there's a census going on in China. The main purpose of the census is to find people who have broken that rule and had more than one child. And they say, we won't punish you if you'll tell the truth. But nobody believes what the leaders say anyway. So families, right now, they're raising a generation of what people call little emperors because they're all only children. Now think about it. Look at this family. How many descendants does W.B. Allen have?
210.
210. Do you know if you lived in China, you would have one child? So how many grandchildren would you have? One grandchild. That's all you'd be allowed. And so we got coming up in China a generation of only children. And they are being spoiled because, you know, they give everything for that child. And unfortunately, that has some other side ramifications. There's still the tradition that it's more valuable to have a male child than a female child. So if you have a female child, but you want a male child and you can't have another one, you get rid of the female child and try again. And so, of this generation of little emperors, about 2/3 of them, this is just a guess, there's no statistics on it, 2/3 of them are male. So when they get up to marriageable age, what's going to happen? Aren't going to be enough females. So marriage is a real problem in China right now.
When you say get rid of them, do you mean get rid of them, or do you mean adopt them out to other
No, I
countries?
mean get rid of them. Infanticide.
And they don't get in trouble for that.
No. In fact, there is forced abortion and sterilization. And infanticide is, although not officially recognized, is very common. Okay, another question?
How many of your university students were only children?
Practically none of our students were only children. This is an interesting situation because these were children who grew up during the Cultural Revolution. And the stories they have about that would just tear your heart out. And now they're going to be the parents of single children. And it's...
When did the one-child rule start?
It started, it started under Mao, and the Cultural Revolution was in 66 to 76. And so it was before 66, but I don't know if you could pinpoint a date on it.
What do you mean by cultural revolution?
The Cultural Revolution was a period of time when Chairman Mao was apparently out of control. He became very senile, and the official version of it is his wife and the Gang of Four took over the operation of the country, and they decided to eliminate the four olds, O-L-D-S, the four olds. Everything that represented the past was destroyed. The Buddhist temples were destroyed, the ancient artworks were destroyed, everything that they could tear down, they destroyed. And it was mainly young people, teenagers, that were called the Red Guard. They were encouraged, in fact almost required, to squeal on everyone, including their parents. And so all of the people who had an education, they label as any education, they labeled as intellectuals. And they were a curse because they were not contributing to society. And so they were sent to the countryside to learn from the peasants. We've talked to some of those who went through this. One man who is a retired professor at our university, I asked him, what happened to you during the Cultural Revolution? And he said, very matter-of-factly, I was sent to the countryside. I said, what did you do in the countryside? How long were you there? He was there 20 years, even though the revolution supposedly lasted only 10. One thing he did was carry huge rocks up mountainsides. Another thing he did was he was harnessed to plows and treated as a beast of burden to plow the field. He had to pull a plow. That's minor compared with what some were done. But that was called the Cultural Revolution.
Was this designed to break families up?
It was designed to break up everything that had to do with old tradition. And it broke up a lot. Right now they're undergoing a sort of a minor cultural revolution since Tiananmen Square. Margaret?
Who determines who goes to college?
Well, there are two ways you determine who goes to college. One way is by passing examinations. Another way is by being a good party member and being the child of a high government official. Both ways are successful, but the last one is most successful. But all of our students were very intelligent. They'd all passed this examination, which is pretty rigorous. And it's mainly by examination.
What are they learning to do? What fields do they go into?
The university system is really quite different from ours. In our city, I don't even know how many universities there were. Our city and the environs had about 6 million people. But every time I turned around, I learned about another university. And every kind of company, like there was a railway institute, that was a university training people who'd work in the railway. There was an engineering university, there was a language institute. Everybody had, every kind of unit had its own university almost. And they were competing with each other for personnel, but for foreign personnel, because you were assigned to one of them to work there. And once you're assigned, it's very, very difficult to transfer to a different kind of work. Well, I was a foreigner, so I didn't.
I know which one were you teaching?
I was teaching at Liaoning Normal University. Normal University means they were training to be teachers in high school. And this was the university, or the high school teachers' university for the whole province. The province is like a state here, only bigger.
How are you treated as Americans?
By whom?
Well, I guess
By the
specifically
officials.
by people that were there. I mean, just
I mentioned how the store clerks treated each other. We were treated not much different, but probably a little better than the local people were treated. By our Foreign Affairs Office, we were treated wonderfully. By people on the street, we were stared at. Well, if we wanted to travel, it cost us several times more than it cost local people. If you wanted to mail a letter within China, it cost you 8 fun. If you wanted to mail a letter outside of China, it cost 2 yuan. That is 24 times as much to mail a letter outside the country. And so we probably, in postage alone, to letters to our family, spent the average salary of a Chinese person, of a professor at our university. And there's some very interesting stories about the post office, but it's been long and I won't tell you too many, but let me tell you one anyway. There's no way you could tell how much postage you put on your letter because they didn't have places to weigh them. So you just had to guess and send it, and if you were wrong, it came back for more postage. And once we sent about 20 letters one day, And then the next 5 or 6 days they trickled back to us because they changed the postage rate and nobody knew. They don't tell you too much in advance. So one time later, we put more postage on all of them, sent them again. One time later I was saying, we were mailing some letters and I said to Maurine, this one seems a little heavier. Do you think it needs more postage? And she said, maybe so. And I said, no, I don't think it does. So we mailed it. 2 days later it came back. There's a little tag on it saying why. And I said, I don't think that's very heavy. And I said, they must have sent it back because you addressed it in red. And I took it to our interpreter and said, what's the reason they returned this? And he reads it and he says, you addressed it in red ink. And I said, so what? And he said, well, if you write someone in a letter in red in China, it means you're going to sever relationships with that person. And I said, well, why do they care if I sever relationships? He says, well, there's a regulation. You can't address it in red ink. There are all kinds of interesting little regulations that apply to foreigners that others, well, I guess that would apply to them too if they sent it. We were not, this is an interesting aspect of China. You're never told anything ahead of time because they think, you know, you're under complete control. It doesn't matter. You don't plan anything anyway. So if they tell you tomorrow you're going to do something, they expect you to do it without any question. Even when they change the time, this is an interesting thing. All of China is about geographically the same size as continental USA. They have one time zone. That shows how uniform things are in China. One time zone for the whole country. But a few years back they decided to have daylight saving time. So they changed it 1 hour in the summer. They call it summertime. We found out that they were going to summertime on a certain day, but we found out by accident. After that, the afternoon, that was on a Sunday night, it's changing. Monday morning, about 9 o'clock, we got a call. Our translator said, oh, by the way, today we're on summertime. You know, I said, well, it would have been nice if you'd told us before it happened, so we didn't know when to go to class. But I didn't tell him. I already knew we were on summertime. But that's the way they do things. They don't let you know ahead of time. And when they came with my contract, I didn't sign a contract till I'd been teaching from August to November. Then they bring a contract, and it said my contract expired June 30th. And I said, well, that's funny. The calendar you gave me said their classes until July 22nd. And I said, are you sure June 30th is the right date? He said, oh, yeah, sure, that's right. And so I wrote and said, you know, I could come to the reunion. I could teach a couple of late summer classes at USU. And so we made arrangements to leave July 1st because my contract ended June 30th. Then a few weeks later, well, actually several months later, I said, could you tell me when the final exams are going to be? So I know, I didn't even know when classes were ending. They didn't tell us things like that. They don't tell us students. They just tell them one day, tomorrow you're having the exam in this class. I said, I'd like to know when the exams are so I know how to prepare. And he says, well, the exams are mostly between July 1st and July 8th, and then you'll be asked to teach in short classes July 9th to July 22nd. And I said, well, that's very strange because my contract ends June 30th. And I said, so I won't be here then. And he said, oh, really? I'd better check with the dean. He checked with the dean and came back and said, do you mean that Americans interpret contracts that specifically? So they just assumed I would teach another month after my contract ended. Because they don't, you know, your whole life is in their hands. You don't make decisions like that. If they tell you, okay, next week we want you to teach this class, you'll do it. They couldn't understand why we... let me tell you another example. We had a spring vacation one day. We had some friends from Ogden who were teaching in Shenyang, 8-hour or 7-hour train ride away. We arranged for them to come down and visit our church. We had a church every Sunday. We had 100% attendance. Both of us were there. This one day, they were going to come and we were going to have 200% attendance. And they had a whole week off, but we only had one day off. So, on the Saturday before, the night before this is, I'd heard on Friday, however, rumor from my students that they were going to give Tuesday and Wednesday off. Tuesday was the day of the holiday. Wednesday was not. And they said, we will have 2 days off next week, but Wednesday classes will be on Sunday. We didn't have Sunday classes. And I had these people coming to visit us on Sunday, and so I said, well, I'll just wait until they officially tell me. So Saturday night, they told me that the next day I was teaching my Wednesday classes. And I said, why is this? And they said, well, the party secretary is the Communist Party secretary who runs the school now. The party secretary exchanged Wednesday and Sunday. He changed Wednesday to Sunday. Yeah. Yes, Wednesday is now Sunday. I mean, the party secretary has that kind of authority. This is Sunday. And so I said, well, that's too bad because I'm not teaching on Sunday because I've got people coming and we've got other plans. And so then the dean called and said, I'm sorry, he called Sunday morning. Sorry I didn't let you know earlier, but you have classes today. And I said, I'm sorry, but I don't. So they don't know how to handle Americans who don't do everything they're supposed to do when they're told.
Now, was it just because you had people coming, or was it because it was Sunday for you and the day of rest?
It was because people were coming, it was because it was Sunday, and because I didn't like the system.
That was the biggest reason. How did they, when I asked how did you, as an American, were they very leery of Americans, or were they, I mean, that, it would be a
Our
curiosity.
students, a few of them were brave enough to come and visit us in our park. I say brave enough because the students who came to visit had to go to the security man, explain why they wanted to see us, and sign their name and the time and their purpose. When they left, they had to sign out. So they have a record of every visit they've made with foreigners. We had a number of foreign students on campus. They had a special dormitory. Chinese students were not allowed to enter the foreign students' dormitory because they get ideas. And the other faculty members, and this is a quote now, were not encouraged to visit foreign faculty. Not encouraged to.
They don't say forbidden, but they mean it.
Yeah. And another interesting thing, one night we were having a Christmas party. I could tell you some religious things that happened too, but we're having a Christmas party for one of our classes. Christmas is not a holiday there, obviously, but we were having a party at and people were having a ball. It was like a young adult party, and we were doing games like that. They'd never had anything like that before. They said they were just so excited about having fun without, you know, getting drunk and stuff like they did at their party. And 10 o'clock came. I hadn't noticed it sneaked up on us. Our door to our apartment opens. The security man stuck his head in. Our students, without saying a word, all stood up and started putting their coats on because it was 10 o'clock. They had to leave. They didn't question it. They didn't say anything. They just got up and left because that was the deadline. And they had, it was a weekend, so they had till 10:30 to get into the dorm before it was locked. But they had to leave our room by 10 o'clock. And they knew it. They didn't question it.
Did they have the right to just walk into your room without knocking? Or was it just
He
that it
had,
was so loud?
he also had the keys to all the rooms, see. So, he did.
That was his job, to go into everyone's room and make sure that everyone left?
Well, he didn't. He knew they were there because, you know,
Had
they'd
to
all
sign
signed in. And he knew because we were making a lot of noise. So he just looked in and that was their signal. Get out of here.
What about the summer on the secretary handled the reaction to the summer teaching?
Nothing happened because I didn't teach and they didn't say anything. And
And I didn't either. I had 4 classes on
yeah,
Wednesday.
it was
No
her
way
biggest
was I
day.
going to
she
teach all
she
day
was
Sunday.
definitely wasn't going to teach. And the party secretary was very interested in what we did. Well, that's a long story, so I'll just tell you it short. Another one. When we left in January. We had 5 weeks off. January, the middle of January till the middle of February. And so we went to Hawaii, and I arranged to do some lectures at BYU Hawaii. And in exchange for that, they gave us free housing in Hawaii. Anyway, 3 of the people who knew we were leaving, our students, asked us if we would buy Bibles and bring back to them. And we were told, you know, you're not supposed to distribute Bibles, and people were kicked out of the country for distributing Bibles. But three of our students ordered them, so we bought 3 Bibles. One of those people was reading the Bible the next semester, and the party secretary saw the Bible and asked him where he got it, and then asked, could you get me a copy? And so he came to me and said, the party secretary would like a Bible. And I said, I'm sorry, but I only got the ones I ordered. And I think if I had another one, I would have said the same thing, because I suspect he was trying to pinpoint the source of the Bible. And so he wanted to see how many I really brought in. But I'd only brought 3. Several people found out later and asked if they could have one, so we could have brought back a whole suitcase full. But our instructions were, you may not proselyte. However, if someone asks you about religion, you may answer them. And that's why it was so fun when Trevor was there. We'd say this, and they'd never seen an American their age before. We said, this is our grandson. He's been on a mission for our church in Japan. Do you have any questions? And wow! For 2 hours solid, they would ask questions. It was really something. And he fielded them pretty well, you know, fresh off his mission. And he did a good job. And
Did he speak in Chinese or Japanese or English? Or?
In English. Remember, our people were going to be English teachers, and so they were pretty competent in English, some more than others.
How well do you think they do at teaching English? I mean, were they?
I think they would do much better than most of the English teachers that they had when they were in middle school. The level is increasing. In fact, most of our Chinese students were generally better at oral English than the Japanese students we'd had 4 years before. And the reason is the Japanese students study English to pass a written examination, and so they don't concentrate at all on oral English. The Chinese students are very interested in learning oral English, and almost all of them listen to the Voice of America. And that's where they learn their English. And it's amazing. They're allowed to listen to the Voice of America. They are not allowed to listen to the Chinese version of the Voice of America, but they have an excuse to listen to the English version because they're going to be English teachers. And so that's how they find out about the outside world, is listening to the Voice of America.
I want to ask, why are they interested in knowing English?
Well, I moonlighted also as a teacher of English at Holiday Inn in Dalian. And almost all of the customers were Japanese. But I was teaching the supervisory personnel English. The reason is, in the world today, English is the language of economics and international trade and technology. And so everybody, right now, don't know what it'll be in the future, but right now, English is very, very important in the world. In China as elsewhere. China has many joint venture businesses, and they're trying to have more and more all the time. And even our Russian expert, who is a very brilliant young woman, 35-year-old woman with a PhD in Russian literature, she said, Russian is not very important in the world today, but English is very important. And everybody realizes that. To get any kind of opportunities, you have to speak English.
Now, are you just teaching them the language itself, or are you also teaching them exactly what we learned in school, the functions of the determiners, the nouns, and everything? Do you teach them all that as well? Or just the
In
language?
grammar, they know grammar better than I did. They have had grammar drummed into them. The main thing they wanted from us was to hear a native English teacher. So we taught composition and oral English. We had some classes of both. There were classes also called Modern American Culture, but they wouldn't let us teach a class like that. Chinese taught those classes.
Did they have paper tigers?
Good party members thought that.
About capitalism, right?
What do you think that backlash against communist system is going to be like? Violent? Ugly?
I can't imagine that it can be anything but violent. There are 3 rumors currently about when it will happen. Everybody everybody assumes it's going to happen, but they don't know when. It's very hard to organize things now because one of the edicts given to our students the second semester was 1, no student meetings, 2, no posting of posters or writing on bulletin boards, and 3, no religious instruction. Those were the 3 new edicts given in February of last year. So the screws are pretty tight, but underground there's a lot of activity still going on. And so it's really hard to assess it. But a lot of people think when Deng Xiaoping dies, then there will be a big power struggle among the other leaders. And Deng Xiaoping has no official position now. He resigned from them. But most people think from behind the scenes he's still calling the signal. When he dies, and he's 85 or 86, and has been in poor health for a long time. So that could happen any time. So that's one rumor. Another rumor is that Li Peng, who is the premier now, will be resigning or forced to resign within 3 months. And that was a month ago, so I don't know if that's going to happen. And the third is that the movement of the students who escaped after the turmoil before and are still organizing will take fire underground, and there will be a big disruption. Most people say 5 years maximum before it happens. But I don't see how it can be anything but violent.
Kind of like waiting for an earthquake.
Yeah, exactly.
Ross, how much access do the students and the faculty have to the technology things that we see spreading information, like computers and fax machines and photocopy machines and all that stuff?
It was almost impossible for us to get a copy of a page of material run off for our classes. There's practically none of that available to them. Computers, there was a Japanese company, NEC, this is the way Japanese give foreign aid. They're so smart, we're so stupid. They were offering free computers to our university for record keeping. And of course then they were their computers and they had to use their software, and they came over and taught them how to use it. There is a computer science department, but you know, computers are practically unknown on the campus, and individual students have never seen a computer. So technology is really scarce, but somehow there are units available. And fax was the way most of the turmoil was carried out before. But our university didn't even have a fax machine. So I don't know how you work those things out. We couldn't even get a VCR to show some videos we took back from Hawaii. We had to do it through the back door, like everybody else.
The fax machines are probably through the back door. Right?
Yeah.
Could they get permission, could your students get permission to visit the Holiday Inn?
No. Even our interpreter had never been inside that building. He didn't know what it was like in there.
Did they watch you carefully too?
Well, your interpreter was with you all the time, right?
No. No. Only when we were at an official function.
You said that you thought there were bugs in your apartment. Did you worry about what you said and think about it ever?
Sometimes I did. When we had certain visitors, like a retired professor whose goal in life is to expose the corrupt history of the Communist Party. And he's writing articles he wants me to publish for him. When he was there, I turned on a tape recorder with music, and we sat over in the corner and talked quietly. I was a little worried about it, yeah. But generally, we didn't even think about that, and we just talked. But I know our phone was bugged because one time I was trying to make a long-distance call within China. The interpreter was there trying to do it, and he dialed about 50 times. He couldn't get through. He said, "Excuse me just a minute." He went downstairs. We're on the 3rd floor. The 1st floor is where the Foreign Affairs office is. He went downstairs. A few seconds he came back. He dialed again, and it went through. I thought, that's peculiar. I wonder what he did while he was down there. But
Hang up the other line.
but we were not watched constantly. We sneaked away a lot. We got on the bus like everybody else, elbowed our way in, fought for a seat. This is the Chinese style. And they didn't know what we were doing when we went. In fact, I didn't get permission to take this moonlighting job, and I found out later I wouldn't have been allowed to if I'd asked permission. Because another university asked me if I would teach them, and they made the mistake of going to the Foreign Affairs Office and asking for permission. They said yes after his contract ends. Yeah. So,
Was there another American professor then coming to take your place next year when you?
there were 3 Americans there, Maurine and myself and one other woman. And at one point we thought they had hired 5 people to take our place, but one of them backed out, so right now they have 4 to take the place of us 3. But they're not, unfortunately, this is the thing that Maurine hated most about leaving. One of them was from New Zealand. Another one was born in Yugoslavia, born in Yugoslavia, raised in Germany, and she was going to be an English teacher. And she didn't want her students that she worked so hard with teaching them American accents to learn New Zealand accent now. Anyway, 2 of them were American of the 4 from California.
They have a funny accent too.
Yeah. Not as much as, there are dozens of Baptist teachers of English in China. They've been doing this for 14 years. They really have a good system. And most of them they recruit from the southern states. And I used to listen to those guys talk, and none of them were in our city. But I thought, this is terrible to have these people teaching English. I felt as bad about that as the Britishers think about having Americans teach English.
So do they have British English classes and American English classes?
Most of the books that our students had, and they didn't have many books, most of them were British English. And many of them had pretty good British accents because they'd had teachers from England and other places. Our dean was a very good British English speaker.
Well, isn't Dalian formerly Port Arthur?
Yes. Dalian.
Or next to it?
Yeah, it was sort of next to it. You probably wouldn't even find Dalian on most of the maps we've seen. It's called several other things, mostly Luda, L-U-D-A. But it's been under Russia, it's been under Japan, and so it has some influence from both of those. And the Japanese are hated universally in our part of the country, and the part we lived in, by the Chinese. But the Japanese businessmen are really very, very prominent there. They like their money.
When they have this revolution type thing that everyone is expecting, do you think that they'll be like the Germans and tear down the wall and all that, go that far, or just change the government type?
China is not like any other nation in many ways. And nobody can, there are a lot of speculation, but nobody even dares try to predict what form it will take. But I don't think it'll be at all like Eastern Europe. By the way, the news that we got on Eastern Europe while we were there was very interesting. You get a little item in the newspaper like this that said, yesterday the government of Hungary was reorganized. And that's it.
Any hint of the stuff going on the Berlin Wall and all that?
Oh, no.
Well,
No, in fact,
didn't Voice of America carry it?
We heard it on Voice of
we heard it on
America.
Voice of America, and so those who understood English heard that. And of course they tell it.
Did they censor your mail?
That's another, I said I had a lot of post office stories. Yes, they didn't censor it, but they opened everything. We don't think they opened all of our letters, but every package we got, anything larger than a regular letter, had obviously been opened. They weren't even careful about how they sealed it back up. And boxes that we sent to ourselves were open. And before I left, our Foreign Affairs office knew I had a video camera, and we were informed that a week before we left, I had to give all my videotapes to them to take to the customs for them to look at before they'd let me take them out of the country. I don't know what they were looking for. And we were always giving our interpreter a bad time because he had to bring the things too. And I said, well, he came to get them. I had 6 of them. And I said, well, would you apologize to the customs people for me because I have nothing here very interesting. Would you tell him that when we left to go to Hawaii in January, we took all the bad ones with us then? I was just trying to show him what a stupid rule they had, you know? I mean, it's such so dumb. But then I got them back a day or two before we left, and they were all wrapped and sealed and stamped so that I could not open them until I got out of the country. So if they had erased or deleted parts or damaged it, I wouldn't have known.
Don't they have a different TV system? Could they even watch them?
Well, there's a way. They do have a different TV system. It's called PAL, and ours is called something like
NTSC.
Well, it's called, they call it MP38 or something like that. And, but there are VCRs made in Japan that will play every system. And they're very expensive, but that's how we took videotapes back with us to use as English teaching tools. We took E.T., Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And what we did was teach him the vocabulary one week and then show him the movie. And we couldn't even get access to our VCR. There was one that played American System on our campus, but it was controlled by a very good party member who wouldn't let us use it. So you couldn't play them for them? Well, we had one student who had a backdoor VCR, and he put in a suitcase. He got it, his father had it. He put it in a suitcase so nobody could tell what it was, and I got it downtown and brought it out on the bus with me, and we showed 13 times a week each of those movies. And we had 13 showings of E.T. in our living room. And 2 weeks later, 13 showings of Indiana Jones.
Different students?
No, same students. But 1 week we would give them vocabulary and a little bit of the storyline so they could follow it. The next week we would show it. The next week we'd have tests and compositions and things on it. They loved it. That was the most memorable thing they've ever had in their English teaching. And it was a great idea. It was Maurine's idea. She kept saying when we were in Hawaii, we should get that video and take it back. And I said, oh, we can't use it there. But as usual, I learned to go along with her ideas, and they worked out. Well, that's a lot longer than I planned to take.
So what was the reaction? What did you hear about our earthquake around here?
Very interesting. The next day after your earthquake, they had a very strong earthquake in northern China. We heard a lot about the one in San Francisco, practically nothing about the one in China. If there's a tragedy or some terrible thing occurs in a Western country, they love to publicize that. And so they got, you know, we could, That's another long
No.
story.
It's late. It's almost 10 o'clock.
Okay, so I'll only take another hour.
This story.
Okay, this
We
story.
have a little stuff for s'mores here if people want to do marshmallows while they're waiting. If the kids can find the wires, then
Sure.
it's just a moment.
One reason I went to Holiday Inn to work is they had CNN by satellite. We had a satellite dish on top of our building. We could have gotten CNN. But what? Instead we got a Russian station. The Chinese news service, they have practically no on-the-spot news to, send people around and get pictures of what's happening. But they do pick up news by satellite from other countries. And so we saw quite a bit of the footage on the San Francisco earthquake. And they didn't even mention that they'd had one.
How many people died in it?
You don't know. They don't say. I don't know if they even count.
No, they just kill them all. And
You probably saw more than we did. Our power was out.
Yeah, we saw quite a bit.
We saw a lot.
But we used to go into Holiday Inn, and we used to go to Holiday Inn an hour before my class there, and one of my students at the desk would give me a key to a room. We'd go up and watch CNN for an hour, and try to keep up on the world. It was wonderful perk.
So it was no surprise to you what happened in Eastern Europe?
No, we heard the coverage, and we listened every day. We had a shortwave radio. We listened every day, almost.
By the way, what became of your shortwave radio?
I still have it.
So did you feel like you had to have that to know what was
Oh,
going on?
it was really a good thing to have. Yes.
You hadn't been able to. You felt very.
Oh yeah, we wouldn't have known what was going on.
Is there anything that you just happened to have left in China?
We left a lot of things in China, but not by any devious design. It was just we couldn't carry anymore. we were overloaded. We didn't leave anything like that. In fact, one thing that when you go into the country, smuggling is a different thing in China than in the U.S. When you go into the country, you have to list things like video cameras and cameras, every electronic thing you have. When you go out of the country, they have a copy of that, and they check to make sure you're taking them all out with you. And so they really checked to make sure I had my video camera with me when I left, and hadn't given it to somebody or sold it to somebody.
So it's a good idea if you're going to bring stuff like that out, you better take it in with you.
Absolutely, yeah. The biggest items smuggled into China are American cigarettes, VCRs from Japan, and television sets. A few people try to smuggle in cars.
Oh, that's hard to fit under.
And some get away with it because they have backdoor connections.
We
But-
met a Chinese student, high school student in San Francisco, and we were talking to him and asking how old you had to be to drive in China. And he looked at us with this strange look and
Drive in China?
he said, there's no age for driver's license because you don't drive unless you have a job that requires you to drive.
Yeah. We had,
There's a driver's license, I thought.
there's no private, essentially no private car ownership in China, but there are quite a few cars. Our university had a sedan, a van, which they call a bread car there because it's shaped like a loaf of bread, and a bus, and each one had a driver. They were assigned to that vehicle. And our sedan was a Russian-built car. The van was Japanese and so on. But individuals don't have cars. I mean, they just don't believe you when you say everybody in America drives cars. They think that's propaganda.
you have any final thought for us about your trip and how you changed?
Well, let's see. Final thought. I suppose my final thought is sort of, I have to think of the last day we were there. We were to leave for the airport about 10:30 in the morning. That was 3 weeks ago.
So you had to leave on the 1st of July.
2nd. Or 1st. When did we leave? 2nd.
No, first day of July.
1st.
Arrived in town.
Yeah.
Let's go to second.
About 8 o'clock or a little before, students started arriving. And there was a steady stream of them from then until we left. By the time we left, there was a big crowd of students. And a lot of them were bringing little gifts, even though they have no money. And we had no space in our suitcase. And they were singing their farewell song to us, and they were crying. And we found out, I suppose this is our final thought, that they are people with the same emotions as any other people, the same wishes, the same desires, the same hopes. They have the same interest in eternal kinds of things, and they want to be successful in life. And so we found out we loved them just like we love our family members here. And it was very sad to leave. And I'm sure that we have friendships we made there that we're going to have forever. And that's my final thought. So thank you all for your patience.